Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Poland Daily History. Today we are at the city of Warsaw, particularly the region that was transformed into the Jewish ghetto during the Second World War by the German occupants. Today we will be speaking with our guest, Mr. Artur Grniewski, a tourist guide and historian about the 1,000 years of Polish Jewish history. Ladies and gentlemen, joining us here today is Artur, historian and a tour guide, specializing in the relationship between the Jewish population and the Polish population of this country. I was wondering, as a tour guide, if you were to give me a tour about the Jewish-Polish relationship in this country, what would you start with?
Well, thank you very much, Ben, for inviting me today to have this possibility to tell about this. Maybe to give you this tour, why not? Sure. About the history of Polish Jews, because this is how I would start. And it's very good that you used this expression that Polish-Jewish relations. That's what you said, because this is how we, people around the globe today, interpret it, that there is Polish and separate Jewish relations, which 1,000 years ago, 900 years ago, 700, 500, even 100 years ago, wouldn't be used because that was an in common history. So the history that we will be talking about today was a history of one nation, one country, with different traditions, with different religions, with different habits that came up to one thing. So for instance, nowadays Christian Catholics during their Christmas Eve eat carp, which was a very popular gefilte fish dish for Jewish people living here in Poland. So that's the same thing. When a Polish couple gets married, at the beginning of the wedding, they take the bread, they put it in salt, and they eat it, which represents prosperity. And this is what today Israeli families do every Friday during their Kiddush dinner in Israel. And in Poland still we do the same thing, so it means that our in common habits were raised together. So that's a beautiful in common history. Yes, it was cut in one moment, harmed very much, so that we feel it till nowadays. If I was to give you a tour, I would start 1,000 years ago in a moment when a Polish country was officially created, officially became a Christian country as well, and then first merchants came in here from Spain, so to take a look at the new possibilities, and it turned out that it was just a cool place to hang around, so that more and more people were coming to Poland. From Spain, a very important date, 1390, when Spanish Inquisition started. That was a moment when everyone in Europe knew about King Casimir. You know, there was such King Casimir in here who fell in love with a Jewish girl. And they had two babies together, and he was ruling our country in between 1333 till 1370. He gave to the Jews same rights as inhabitants of the country, and then 20 years later, after he dies, Inquisition in Spain starts, and many Jewish families are coming to Poland saying Polan or Polin, which means in Hebrew, here I stay, or here I rest. And that's why the name of Poland in Hebrew is Polin.
I was really interested in how you told me that there are different traditions from each side of the aisle that derive from the other one. Can you give us more examples about like some of the traditions that stem from a Polish tradition and Jewish tradition?
That is a question that also very frequently appears during my tours. So what else? What other similarities? So when I have guests from Israel or Jews all around the world on board, when I tell them, hey, you know, there is such a Polish saying, when there are two Polish people, there are three opinions. And then they laugh, because they are exactly the same. We are very similar. And that's why maybe nowadays when these tough topics are raised, it's so difficult for us to find an agreement, because when you are just as someone else so similar, then it's easy for you to start an argument. For instance, you argue with members of your family the most, usually, at least me, and that's how it is, that's how it happens. So referring to your first questions, when it comes to Polish-Jewish relations, what I would say about this, conversation. Polish historians and Jewish historians, if they sat together and start to talk about the facts that they agree with, it would be very good for our in common history. Otherwise, what's happening at the moment? We talk about the things that divides us,
right.
exactly. But maybe it's a good first step that will lead to a very fruitful conversation in the future.
Right, right. At least a conversation is starting, so we'll see where it leads.
Yes, finally we can have a conversation, because in communist days, so for 44 years after World War II, as a Polish nation, we couldn't have a conversation. Our government was set up by the Eastern, let's say, empire, and this is how we couldn't talk about our history. Now we can, so that's why these topics are starting out at the moment.
All right.
And yes, that's why let's move back to the very first moments of the history of Polish Jews, and this is something that will be very nice for me to talk about today.
King Casimir III the Great took the throne in 1333 and quickly strengthened the rights of Jews in Poland through a number of statutes. Under his reign, the number of Jews in Poland increased, and the first Jewish communities sprung up in cities such as Lwów, Sandomierz, and the area of Kazimierz in Krakow. Next up, we will ask Mr. Górniewski whether his successors continued his legacy. You mentioned earlier the name King Kazimierz and him being a very Jewish-friendly ruler. I was wondering if there are any other rulers that share the same affection with the Jewish population as him.
We have this answer provided in Polin Museum in Warsaw, which is just one block away from here. The Museum of 1000 Years History of Polish Jews provides us such a very nice stronghold, like it makes you feel that you are in a stronghold in a village, and there is this quotation of 13th century Polish king who says, "If a Pole commits a crime against a Jew, he will be judged in the same way as he committed the same crime against another Polish man. And if a Jew commits a crime, he will be judged by the Poles and the Jews." So this is how first Polish-Jewish equality was adopted in this country.
Right.
So King Casimir, like, he gave the final point of this creation. And also there in Krakow there is this district of Kazimierz.
Right.
Out of that king, and there is also one more city in Poland called Kazimierz. There were so many villages and cities with 90% of Jewish population, and you know what? This is how it was. They, just as nowadays every single Italian city will tell you they have the best pizza in Italy.
Sure.
Then in every single of these villages, you are having Jewish families who were saying, "Hey, we have the best vodka in Poland."
Oh, look at that!
This is how this distillation process, vodka out of wheat, was created in here. So when you were entering a village, there was one hand waiting for you for shalom, and the second hand with a glass of vodka, so to try their products and maybe stay for some time.
You just mentioned the vodka distillation. Was the process invented here in Poland?
So that's how it started. The Jewish families, that was like the year's first most popular occupation. They were renting a piece of land from local aristocratic noble families, and then usually the man was working on the field doing the tough job, and the lady was running a tavern. You were visiting such tavern, and you had local products over there, and this is how it all was starting out.
So you're saying that the men plow the fields while the ladies run the tavern. The most notable thing being the vodka, and are there any other interesting things going on there?
Of course, there is such a little legend that so the lady of the tavern was calculating how many shots one person drank.
All right.
So, you know, the guy was just drinking the shots and he didn't care about the cash.
Of course.
And the lady was calculating it. So most important thing, so to calculate it in a fair way. So there was such a little Jewish legend that the lady who would calculate it in a wrong way, then she deserves a very bad fate. So it was very important for them to calculate everything in a proper way so that the customer in the tavern could just relax and enjoy the local products.
As we can see, Poland has been for centuries the safe haven for Jews fleeing persecution. During the 18th and 19th centuries, the city has the largest amount of Jewish population in all of Europe. The two nations coexisted in peace until the Germans conducted the Holocaust. That's it for today. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee. I'll see you next time on Poland Daily History.